Okay, welcome aboard the Urban Escape. We're going to take you out of the city for half an hour with two great guests, Mark, Matthias. Welcome. I will ask you to introduce yourselves in 2 seconds from now. We're going for half an hour into a special area. My name is Gijs Garcia Bogart. I'm a senior strategist at Evident. We do online stuff. I try to answer the questions that come to us and come with an answer that does a little bit more than asked for, and it's a very wide range of clients. Welcome aboard. We're in a very special area. Maybe Mark and Matthias, you can introduce yourselves briefly, because I don't know if everybody has seen you speak on the Picnic Festival.
Hi folks, my name is Mark Ralston. I'm with a company called Frog. We used to be called Frog Design. That's kind of a meaningful change for us. We went from being a traditional design organization to a broader based creative organization, because at Frog we believe the challenge is much bigger than design, helping our customers. So, and that's a very short version of my background. I've been with Frog for 17 years. I lead the creative organization globally, so my title is the Chief Creative Officer. I've seen Frog grow from about 60 people to today we are 1,600 creatives, which means we are designers, researchers, interaction folks, engineers, mechanical engineers, software engineers, industrial designers, all types of creative types that work together to put ideas into the market. And my passion and what I talked about today is how computing has become fundamental to our lives, and how rather than sort of passively just sort of accepting this the babysitting chore that we have, taking care of these little boxes, we have an opportunity, especially as designers, to think about and actively design them in a way that they can be naturally part of our life. And so today I talked about the city becoming a primary actor in that future computing experience. So that's just a little bit about me.
Great, thanks.
Yes, hello, my name is Matthias Hollwig. I always try to explain what I do by saying I'm architect, starting with the DNA is architecture, but from there on always branched out, also founder of Architizer, which became the biggest social media for architects by now. But through the curiosity, I also become a co-developer of new retirement communities, which as a long-term purpose should really redefine what retirement is, because it needs to be eliminated, and even more so, nursing homes and assisted living facilities have to be eliminated. And that is what I was speaking about. I call it the new aging revolution, which starts by ourselves. Point number one, declare yourself old early. When you have surpassed 50% of life expectancy, happened to me 2 years ago. So I'm a senior citizen, and let's change the world together.
Thank you. I take the liberty to take 5 minutes of this flow to tell you a little bit about where we are, because I said, okay, we're gonna leave the city. It's an urban escape for half an hour. We're in a very special type of nature now, in an ecosystem that has some unique elements in it. It's connected directly to the port of Shanghai, the port of Singapore, and the port of Seattle. And it's by these big guys behind you, the big ships that travel between these areas and bring us what we need. Maybe bring us the algae we need, and we talked about it this morning, because algae can solve about any problem, I think. They bring the water to this area, the salty water, and we're now floating in an area where there's a lot of salty water and a lot of sweet water, as we say it here. It brought life to this area. Crabs from China, the red American lobster did this area, and they live just underneath this boat we're floating in. And there's also very special creatures living here. There's now a plague of jellyfish floating around here. They call it a plague because it's many, but it's not a problem because the fish like them very much. But it's taking you out in this area to maybe escape from the city a little while and maybe comment on the city from the outside. So we're here on the ship in the floating city of Amsterdam. It's a city built on I sound like a rondvaartboot guy, huh? If you look to the right, you see the smallest house of Amsterdam. It's a floating city because it's built on water. They put all kinds of animal skins in the water to build houses on, and they build poles that are rotten and not functioning very well, so everything is crooked, as you've seen probably in the canals. A little bit about us, what we do. I told you I'm a senior strategist at Evident. Did I tell you that? Or was it the run before? We did some things with nature recently. For the National Forest Company, we thought about bringing nature into people's homes on a very sort of personal and very specific level. What we did was we created an artificial home for foxes, for a fox family, and put underground cameras in to see what happened when a family would adopt this area and do what foxes do. It was a great success. People really adapted this kind of access to nature from their screens, and we had 2.2 million visitors in 8 weeks. Maybe some of you have seen it. So we brought people in, and they saw the live registration of a fox giving birth to 6 young underground. So we accessed the rooms of people's, but the purpose of the Forest Council is, of course, to bring people outside. And then we made a solution to facilitate that in an iPhone app, providing you with nature surrounding you. You choose for the amount of time you like to travel, maximum, and then you get all the areas that you can go outside. And as I told before, it's we don't have real nature here in this country, as you maybe know. We have parks that we call nature, and they act a little bit like nature, but there's almost no real nature left. Although we're a green company and have our responsibility in society, we're not focused on nature only. 5 years ago, we invented a concept to make inhabitants of a new neighborhood participate in the structuring of the neighborhood. They could choose the amount of space they needed and plot it on a map. Yeah, it's right behind you, Mark. It's all happening right behind you. So they could choose the place they live in, and it was plotted on a Google Earth map. And it was early. The technology was just there, and the adaptation was great. We also facilitated the discussion about the area in sessions with people who decided to live there. And there's on the marketplace here on Picnic, there's guys who do the same thing in a physical way. I don't know if you've seen them there, and they needed an online platform. So maybe we'll work together on this one. But it's about you guys, of course. I took my 5 minutes, and I'd like to discuss a little bit further, both on the subject that Matthias brought in. I saw your talk. I'm sorry to say I didn't see yours, Mark, because I was floating here. But it's about growing old, and I choose the words growing old because there's the word growing in it, and it's that should be maybe the second part of your life should be better than the first. And that's not what you see happening in the real world. And you've really sort of inspired me with the focus you put on this second part of your life, turning 40 in about 3 weeks from now. So that's a scary thought. So maybe it's nice to start from that one, because you also say, okay, I want to sort of involve, Mark, I want to involve technology in how people's lives will look in the future, and maybe start from the 40s and up. So maybe, Matthias, you can sort of kick off the vision that you shared with the audience on the stage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I believe that for most people, when they're 40 or 50, there's a big change in life. It could be that the kids are out of the house, and our general, how would you say, sequence of events, it's not traditional anymore. And there's a great opportunity because at that moment you can really shift gears and really revisit your own life at that point, and not just do it out, what do I want to still do with my professional experiences, what do I want to still visit, but also really critically observe what will be my own experiences until the very end. And it's really, especially in the US, it's really surprising that most people consider retirement and they're making plans, but they're making no plans for the last 3 years. And they're very much in denial. And what happens is that they're forced at some point into other locations, into dependencies, which is absolutely un-American, and it's also unhuman. And I have talked to many people and asked them, so what do you think what will happen in the last 3 years? And they have no clue. They have not even visited a nursing home and assisted living facility. And when I tell them that most people will live with 4 other people in one room, which was a law which came in California into effect 3 years ago, down from 6 people. That was the innovation in California 3 years ago, so down to 5 now. It's just, people just don't know about it. And there's so many simple tools what you can do in your own lives to avoid this. Because it's also proven fact that 50% of people moving into nursing homes do so because of social deficits and not because of physical deficits. Lots of people move there where also the physical deficits are actually not that drastic. And all the kind of effects together are really, on the one hand, ineffective in terms of really helping you for a great experience, and the creating age depression, dislocalization, and so on. So that is for me that kind of growing old, what people see as just kind of deficit and into the void. It's what needs to be avoided. And when we start to plan our future self, and also as architects and urban planners start to create the cities, make the cities fit again and our living environments, then we can together we can plan a journey which will be a celebration of life. Because I believe that actually the end of life is what gives us that kind of precious moment which we have. And we have to make the best out of it.
Great. Mark, it's an awkward question, of course, to ask if you're in the second part of your life, but
I got no problem with that. I'm 42 and I have no idea what it's like to be in my 40s. So
you're exactly the same age then, so exactly on the same mindset.
Yeah, I mean, I really, that I thought that birthday would be a big deal, and it turned out to be no big whoop. And so I'm not necessarily thinking like that yet. And I hope I don't too soon. So I really, the funny thing about growing up is no one tells you this, and I'm going to tell my son this is in no time. He's 9 right now, so it's not that important. But you're the same person you were when you were that young. It's just you have a bit more experience to draw from. It's not like you're a different brain. But when I was that young, I felt like I might be someone else, like it was an unrecognizable thing, this dark future. And it's nice to find out it's not. You're the same self. And I think that notion is what we need to use more constructively in this idea of aging, because I have to force myself to think about that same realization that I arrived at here, that when I'm 80, I will be that same person with the same not the same concerns, but the same emotional backlog that I might have now, and I better give a fuck about my situation and start preparing for it. I think your point about the United States is right. I mean, I'm an American. I live in Austin, Texas, and clearly the situation's a bit problematic. Then again, I tend to have faith that we're late to fix our problems. We will fix it. And if nothing else, there are a hell of a lot of old people, and they are getting older and living, and they are a massive voting bloc, and they will, right now they're voting a bit crazy, but they'll eventually vote in their interests, and we'll fix it for that reason alone. I'm not an expert on this, but those are my feelings about it.
Yeah.
Japan certainly is the model to watch, right?
Yeah. And in your design vision or design work, have you been confronted with specific demands or needs from, let's say, elderly people? You know, you don't love the word, but it's. But have you been confronted with a situation where that was an influence to your design or?
At times we are. Right now we're creating an incredible number of healthcare-related devices that are not what traditional healthcare instruments, the kinds of things we design, were for many years focused on critical care, emergency care. They're basically triage tools. But today we're very focused on lifestyle tools. There, you know, and the design considerations there are like the design considerations of an Android phone. You know, how to make it fun and usable and socially acceptable and fashionable. Yet, in these cases, they're actually metering the body's glucose level to make sure this person stays alive, right? And so that line is interesting. We've crossed it where, you know, for example, statistically, 50% of the population, at least in the United States, is on some kind, and this is actually the truth in Europe as well, some kind of managed care situation. They take medicine regularly to stay healthy because they have to. 50% of the population. So yes, design has absolutely arrived there. I don't necessarily think it's exactly age related, but certainly the age has been part of it. We're not facing a real set of discrete age issues as we are a set of lifestyle issues that are implicitly associated with age. We occasionally work with the Japanese, and they very much have their heads incredibly wrapped around this. I mean, their fascination with robotics is driven, at least economically, by this. You know, robotics for the Japanese have been a deep fascination in a societal level, but they're putting it to work because of the needs of the elderly.
I read some. Is this working? Yeah. I read something about using RFID chips in pills and sending you a message to take it at the right time. It's how do you
We just did a program. We
Okay.
just did a program for a company to do that. I can't give you all the details, but it basically, so you take this pill, and as long as you have a meter on your body, it is tracking the lifespan of that pill. And so it can basically tell your doctor it's good, he took it.
Yeah.
So and it tells you, you know, you're good until 2 o'clock, and then you need to take another.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal for certain people who are really bad at. Most people are really bad at taking their medicine on time.
Can it in the future also give you the amount of medicine that your body responds to see to look into the future? Because I know
we're not. I don't know. We're not there yet.
Okay.
We're not experiencing that yet.
No.
We're just. I mean, it's such a hard work just to get the basic reporting and management to work. You know, I'd love to look more aggressively at the future, but in terms of our enterprise, our business as helping make these things, we're still trying to get the basics done. It's funny, but conceptually, yes, that is really the sweet spot.
Matthias, you showed us on stage. You showed us a project you did in Africa. Maybe it's nice that, especially for the people who didn't hear that, to tell a little bit about that, because it was on a micro level the thing that you can do in cities with elderly and education.
Yeah, absolutely. So we call it Aging in Africa. It's the first retirement community in West Africa, and it's initiated by priests in the Ivory Coast. And so they invited me to come to Abidjan, and they said like, oh, we need this place for the elderly priests, because in Africa still families taking care of each other, but the priests don't have families, so they end up in the streets. And so we went to a site he had in mind, where he had arranged a meeting with the chief from a village. And they sat together and they start talking, and the priest had his pledge and was like, listen, I have 60 priests, they need a new home. I would like to create a community for them, and I need a plot of land. And the chief said like, well, you know what, I have this wonderful land next to this lagoon. I want to give it to you for free, but what can you give me? Yeah, and my people. And the priest looked around and were like so many children. It was like, well, I see all these children. My priests have studied. They're lawyers. They're academics. They can teach. I built your school, and that will be the center of our community. And they shook their hand, and that's what it is. And the beauty is that without negotiation, without really big concept development, just intuitively with common sense, they created what we try all the time to convince our client to do: intergenerational connectivity, integration between the young and the old, and also using still the capacities which are still present and capable within the retired community. Yeah, and unfortunately Ivory Coast had quite some unrest the last 2 years, so we had to put it on the slow burner, but actually next month I have the first meeting again. The priest is going to come visit to New York, and we hope to realize it in the next 2 years. Yeah.
Great, great. Just to switch to my kind of area. We talked a lot about collecting data and using the online domain to do that in all sorts of ways, doing research or doing see how people move in areas. We talked about it earlier today on the ferry. How do you both use online media to get your answers or get the environmental data that you need to project or to use in your designs? Mark?
Well, for me, I use it probably like everyone here on the boat uses it, but I think what's interesting for us at Frog is we're facing several customers who want to use it in new ways to enable people to move through space, through a large space in a planned, cared for way. So the data in that case is them. It is where they're standing, who exactly they are, and what permission stages or what needs and desires they have. So if you take and imagine a large park or a business facility, allowing people to completely move fluidly through that space and take advantage of all those facilities. And I'm being a bit obtuse because I can't tell you exactly what it is because it's not done yet.
Okay.
And yet have you might say the building in this case is the computer. Instead of carrying around devices or keys and credit cards and using all those individual affordances to get in and out, to buy things, your presence enunciates all of that. And it's really quite miraculous when it works, because it means, let's say we're in this boat together. I don't know who any of you are, but with this tool, I could actually lay in front of me some kind of visual, some screen, it could be my phone or it could just be a projected screen, and be able to actually know. And that changes the dynamic of the room immensely. I know one of you's, terribly interested in the same topic or has actually just worked on something similar, maybe works at the client I'm talking about. It's like, hey, you suddenly have a bridge. You're strangers right now, but that bridge is possible. And we're working on these projects that I have to tell you are incredibly exciting for that reason. Data becomes agency to new experiences and not just a private thing. It's a public thing at that point. We have private access to this, right? But to get the public value, the interpersonal value, is too hard. The other thing is just not having to use fixed boxes, surfaces, and this is a much more narrow issue, the idea of engaging a machine but in a natural manner. Right now my hands are waving madly, and that is a great input device if we can capture it. We can't capture it right now because there's nothing kind of observing the movement, but if you can just add that to the facility, to the room, then this becomes an incredible tool. It's an instrument to say, give me this information, no, go away, all of the necessary instructions one would want to give a computer without having to leave this moment, the conversation, and go to it and then come back. That breaks. down our life into those little chunks because we've stopped to babysit. And that is something I think we're really enjoying the opportunity to fix. It's also a hell of a challenge because, you know, everyone we've hired right now, all of our best talent is focused on how to draw more and more clever screens. When things aren't that anymore, you've got to learn, you've got to do new things, and that for us has been a lot of fun. Like, what is the gesture to say, go to the next screen? That's just a simple command, right? Right now it's a button on a screen or a drag. What is it in space if there is no screen to speak of? We've got to figure that out.
Thanks, Mark. You just said it. Like, okay, there must be people here very much interested to know something else. I would like to take some questions from the audience. Give you the opportunity to get to know each other a little bit more. I don't know if there's any questions to be asked now to Matthias or Mark. No questions. So you don't need this device. Yeah, there's one.
Thanks. Is it working?
It is working, but maybe I'll repeat your question if it's not.
Okay, well maybe you can hear me.
Yes.
Yesterday in your speech you were talking about redefining aging and retirement in the city. But I was wondering what practical examples you had of that. Because there are kind of the African example you mentioned, but what about Amsterdam and New York?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm working with the University of Pennsylvania since 3 years on research, and before I worked with the Bauhaus Foundation about it. And at the Bauhaus, what we did, we created our own vision, and we called it Geropolis, and we subdivided the city according to user profiles, which are marketing tools. So I, for example, would be the post-consume materialist, and I would live in a city, and I don't want to own things, but I want to experience things. And then from there on, we started to develop scenarios. So how would mobility work for me? How is access to groceries and all this kind of things happen? So we went through all of this, and we have it documented as kind of ideas. And then with the University of Pennsylvania, we looked into all this kind of NORC, naturally occurring retirement communities. There's something in New York is Tudor City, for example. And you have that actually in many different configurations and scenarios. And in Japan, Sejima from Sana, she had designed, for example, a kind of clinic type and community center in the middle of a naturally occurring retirement community. So to be able to support the general population who lives there with some of the medical services and other services which the area was lacking. But very seldom, and that is one of the examples, but very seldom you really find active infusion of compensational infrastructure in a way. That's why in the US you have all this kind of retirement communities in Florida and so on. The problem, and some of them are fantastic and they work great. Problem is that you have to move out of them when you're handicapped. And that's why I think also that trend of really creating specialized environments based from a more corporate kind of mindset, it's still problematic because funny-wise, people who are 70 and 80, they don't want to see the people who are 90. And that's what, yeah, they're old. and that's kind of where
Pushing out old. 40-year-olds are old. No, 50's old.
That's really old. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's also what was so exciting. Yesterday we had a workshop. How can we break down that kind of barrier? Because there's something where you have to bring the much younger and the older back together because they're mutual benefit. And I base the benefit on time because some of them have time and experience, the other one don't have time. And there's an amazing opportunity which can happen in kind of sharing things with each other again, and with that recreate the kind of generational contract, not between the kids and the parents, and with that the parents and the grandparents. No, it can be between people who don't know each other but who want to share that.
Great, we're almost going off board again. And there's a tweet coming into my screen there about this interview. I think it's a good thing I took this picture for the theme of this talk, and I'm glad you sort of filled in the thing that it's very opportune to look outside into your own situation and not inside out using your app or your device, just outside. And also from an age perspective, that's about the same conclusion, that you have to sort of step outside yourself or your own situation and try to look into it. So thanks a lot, guys, for being on board. Give them a big hand, I think. Thanks for floating with us. We're floating one time this afternoon at 3 o'clock. So you're all welcome, or you're also welcome to just sit on the rooftop and enjoy the sun. Thanks.
Thank you.